If you thought that was dazzling, wait till you see this. Early on, we had to give Marsh and Associates an idea, rough cut. How much money are we talking about here? How much money do they have to work with? Because, as Steve will tell you in a few minutes, these folks have been involved in some major projects, tens of millions of dollars, building country clubs from ground up. So we gave them a working number of $2.5 to $3.5 million. What can you do with that? And so we got about 2 months into the project, and they started to come back with some early designs and sketches. And in each case, we insisted, give us rough cut how much we're talking about in the way of money. And they were able to do that, but I always qualified it by saying, this is the roughest of rough cuts, but they've been doing this for so many years, they have confidence at about the 90% level that the number they give us is probably 90% there. And so we settled on $3 million. And so on the more recent iterations, they came back and they said, based on the design that Steve just took you through, and you can appreciate where we're doing a lot of ripping and tearing and demolition and construction, on that upper level, pure construction cost a little over $1.5 million. And on the lower level, $825,000. And then what they call so-called soft costs, finishing touches. Now, having constructed something really beautiful, like the new living room, give us a budget, an estimate as to what are the costs to finish it at the same level of quality that the construction will yield. And so we've been working with a number of about $500,000. And for the type of finishing touches required, that would go a long way. And then finally we get into the design fees and the construction manager, which we pegged at $150,000. And I want Steve to add a little more color to that number.
Thank you. So, how many of you live on the east side and were exposed to the road project this year? Quite a few of you. It was handled in oversight with a representative under contract to us from Ground Engineering as the project manager. We certainly had a contract with the road company, but we needed somebody that for sure had HEB's best interests at heart all the time. And so we envisioned that same kind of person being on board for this project. If you approve this on November 8th, the very first thing we will do is we will go under contract with a general contractor or a construction company. The second thing that we will do is that we will begin to get a better cost estimate after we get detailed drawings. These are first cut, and as I would hope that you would expect us to do, that we have got those, or we've received those for minimal cost. But we would have architectural renderings and drawings. From that we get refined costs, make sure that that 90% number is within our budget. And then lastly, what we would have is a construction schedule, because we know there's going to be a disruption to the Eagle's Nest. We know there's going to be a disruption down in the fitness center and so forth. We've got to get that schedule mapped out so that you can make your plans around the activities that we need. So that's the way that we will approach it, and that would be the function up here on that 150,000 line.
Thanks, Steve. So we hit a total of $3 million. That is not $3 million plus 10%, no, it's $3 million. $3 million, all in, tops, no more. And as we get farther along in the process, this project, if approved, will take on a lot more definition. and we'll start to really firm up the costs. In the process, what we may well encounter is it does add up to $3.3 million to do the project that Steve has described. What we will have to do, and we as the board, will have to go through and start prioritizing between the must-haves and would like-to-haves. And then we will continually monitor that so that it's very possible something that we envision and wanted very badly, it hits the cutting room floor. Because 3 million means 3 million. 3 million means 3 million. How do we pay for that? Well, the first 213,000 on this comes from the reserve fund. Why from the reserve fund? This is a capital improvement project. As Steve mentioned earlier, when we put the reserve budget together for this year, we included $130,000 for new exercise equipment that will not be spent this year. We included $80,000 more or less for new locker rooms that will not be spent this year. And we had $3,000 to recarpet the fitness room that will not be spent this year. However, it is possible to say, since it was part of an approved budget this year, it was essentially funded this year, in other words, the monies were set aside, we believe we can honestly and logically bring that spend, which does not occur in 2017, but will occur in 2018 and 2019, when we start spending money on the so-called soft costs. That's when it would be tapped. Wait a minute, Bob, there are other aspects to this that are also included in the reserve fund. That's true. However, if they're in 2018 and beyond, they are just numbers on a piece of paper. Monies have not been set aside for those items that are out there on the horizon or just over. We use the cash flow method to fund our reserve, which is a very, very fancy way of saying we pay as we go. 213,000, that's the total. No more. No more from the reserve fund than that. And it's those three items of spend that were approved for this year. In the absence of this repurposing project, we well might have spent the money this year, but now they are part of a much larger result, leaving $2,787,000 that will be funded strictly from the capital improvements fund. That $2,787,000, $787,000 will come from balances on hand at the start of the project in that fund, and for future assessments, a portion of the future assessments, and I'll add to that in just a moment. But the important number up there is $2 million. $2 million in the form of secured bank financing. And the reason why we had to go to secured bank financing is we could not raise enough money in the relatively short period of time to complete this project without having this clubhouse torn up for years, which would not be acceptable to anyone. We need a rapid source to a lot of cash, hence secured bank financing. Let's walk through 2018 and 2019. Here it gets a little busy, but we expect to start the year with $654,000 more or less in the capital improvement fund. We propose that if, and only if, this project is approved by a vote of the membership through the delegates on November 8th, to increase that present $10 per month for the assessment for the capital improvement fund to $15. Keep in mind, in 16 and 15, it was $15 a month. It was in 17, it dropped to 10. On an annualized basis, at the rate of $15 per month per homeowner, that generates just short of $260,000 a year. For the last several years, we have taken that assessment at closing upon the sale of Heritage Eagle Big Ben homes and deposited those into the capital improvement fund. So there are two major sources of incoming cash into the capital improvement fund. We generate a little bit of investment income, hardly enough to talk about, but now, in 2018, we closed our bank loan at a cost of about $10,000 based on the non-binding term sheet that I've been able to get. We're talking to two lenders and in the fortunate position of having them to eventually compete for the business if the project is approved. Both of them understand nothing happens until November 8th. We start to get into the construction period. Well, let me just say that if it is approved, we'll start the loan application and have that facility in place well before we even draw upon it. I'm assuming that the first draws under the bank facility during the 12-month phase where we can draw on it. It's an interest-only arrangement, and it's at an interest rate of about 3.25% to 3.5%. Very favorable. And keep in mind, once we draw, interest is payable monthly, no principal. And then that number of $2,077,000 is no one's number but mine. Because once we start demolishing, the demolishing goes fast. We'll want to immediately get into construction. And then you immediately get into some pretty sizable progress payments. So I estimate that during 2018, the project will begin sometime in late first quarter, maybe April at the latest. And through the next 9 months, we spend $2.1 million, $2,077,000 on this project in calendar 18, leaving us balance in our capital improvement fund of just under $400,000. The calendar turns to 19, same $15, same amount from assessments, slightly more in the form of contributed capital from closing, very modest amount of investment income. We draw down the remainder of our $2 million facility. Interest, $70,660, and interest and principal repayments of $190. This assumes that the drawdown period ends at the end of March and immediately converts to an 84-month term loan, which if we close today would bear an interest rate, are you ready for this? 3.5% to 3.75%. Amazing. That is what makes this possible. We finished the clubhouse in 19, and certainly by the end of 19, perhaps third quarter, we now have our project complete, and we can enjoy every amenity that's described in the schematic that Steve went through. And we still have just short of $268,000 in our capital improvement fund. I want to stress one thing. No monies will come from operating cash or from the operating fund, from the contingency fund, from the litigation settlement fund to help fund this project. The only contribution is $213,000 from the reserve fund, period. There is no thought. This project will essentially be self-funded except for that small slice. All right, now we have a completed project, and now we are servicing a term loan that has a full term of 84 months, and we're about 9 months into it. There you can see the beginning balance at the end, for 2020, same $15, same annualized contribution, modest increase each year as we continue to earmark that 3-month assessment for deposit into the capital improvement fund. Again, very modest amount of investment income. And now we start to service that debt. Between interest and principal, it's approximately $27,000 a month, principal and interest, to service that debt. Have room for a very modest spend of $50,000 on other projects other than unrelated to the repurposing. Very modest, okay? But what I'm not saying, well, we're limited to 50,000. We're not. By this time, we're 2-3 years out and more. What I'm trying to demonstrate first and foremost, that it is possible to do a $3 million project, borrow $2 million, repay that after a 12-month construction loan period, and have that debt completely paid off in March of 2026, and have a constant assessment of $15 per homeowner per month during the entire time. And you can see that at no time do we get all that close to not having a very comfortable cushion should our capital from closings not reach that total. And you can see that because in 2026, we're down to our last 3 payments, the balance in that capital improvement fund has accumulated to $339. Some future board may say, don't need that much. $10 sounds about right. That's 8 years out, who knows? So with that, taking you through the numbers.